So you've decided it's time to change that water heater. I know it seems a little daunting, but really it's not that hard of a task. For an electric water heater, there's only a few steps involved, and then you just got to kind of manhandle it around and get the new one put in and hooked back up. It only uses a couple of special tools, actually nothing special per se, but it just uses a few tools and you'll be ready to go. The first thing you're going to want to do is to turn off the electricity. You don't want to run any risk of electrical shock, obviously. So find the water heater connection in your breaker box, then use a Voltic or something like this to make sure you don't have power before you begin. Once you're sure that's good, I usually start by disconnecting that power. So let's go there. I'm going to pull the screws out of the cover. The covers are, it might look slightly different on yours. It might be in a slightly different location. I have seen them where they go in kind of into the side of the water heater as well. So there's some variance there. Just kind of roll with the differences. The principles are the same. Now, once we get this cover off, we can get in and get these wires disconnected. We've got this ground nut up here. Got that pulled loose. Now we're just going to unscrew these wire nuts. Once they're unscrewed and broke free, you'll want to loosen this clamp so you can get the wires out to reuse on the next water heater. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to begin the process of draining the tank now that I'm sure the electrical is not only turned off but completely disconnected. Set that to the side just to get it to stay out of the way. Now for the sake of convenience, put this cover back in place and then we'll start emptying it out. Now for the sake of this demonstration, you'll notice this water heater is up on wood blocks if and when you get a view down there. Obviously you don't want to do that in your own home. It was just for the sake of the demonstration so we could get the height and clearance we needed to make it as visible as possible for you. I'm going to go down and get this hose spigot hooked up and get this thing draining. I am being careful not to cross-thread it. This particular drain valve has plastic threads, so I want to be careful with it. Once the hose is screwed on tight, I'm going to open the valve by turning it this way. Different drain valves look different. A lot of them look like hose spigots and they just have a handle, or they might have a slot where you use a standard screwdriver to open it. Once it's open, you're sure you've got your garden hose ran out someplace where it's safe for the water to go, downhill away from the water heater obviously. Some sediment buildup might slow the initial flow. If you come back up here, what I do to combat that is I do leave the water on for just a few moments. That extra pressure of the incoming water will help blow out that sediment and help it drain a little quicker. If at this point you've considered hooking up some adapters so you can hook up an air compressor to it, this would be the time when you do that. You just shut off the incoming water, unhook its main line, and you'll be ready to go. Now, at this point, assuming the water heater is drained, I'm going to get the supply turned off. And because this was originally done with shark bites like this, it makes it simple to disconnect. Once the water heater is fully drained, which if you just allow gravity to do, could take up to an hour, so be patient with that. It'll be quite a bit lighter. You're just going to disconnect that garden hose, and then you'll be able to disconnect your connections, and you'll be ready to go. To disconnect the connections, we can do it here at the water heater, but if you're replacing your supply lines, you're still going to need a shark bite tool like this, And this just clips on the pipe and is pressed against the back of the SharkBite fitting to release it. If you have copper lines up here, you may have to use a copper tubing cutter to get these pulled loose. The SharkBites sure do make it easy though. There you go. Now for the sake of the demonstration, we didn't have a drain tube on the TPR valve, but you might need to disconnect that as well, and that would simply unscrew. The new one should have its own, or you may be able to reuse the one that you have currently. And other than unhooking the garden hose down there, this thing's ready to be moved. Okay, now that you've got the old water heater out and cleared away, and you've all but broken your back getting the new one in place, let's get it connected, get it full, get it electrified, and get you on your way to doing something else. The first thing we're going to do in this case is we're going to hook up our main water supply lines because we want to start filling the water heater. It doesn't take long for it to fill, but it needs to be completely full before we can get the electricity going. I always want to do this first because if you hook up the electricity and then not really thinking about it, if this gets electrified before it's full of water, it'll burn out those elements. And the brand new water heater, you want to start with all the best equipment. So having to immediately fix something would be a bummer. So get it full first and then get the power turned on. We are going, the truth is you could solder these connections. You would use fittings like this right here that would just screw on the proper tape, obviously. But the truth is, I don't solder any more than I have to. And in a case like this, when you've got the flexibility and the protection of a braided stainless line available, I don't solder unless I have to. Now the other advantage is that because of this rubber seal in here, this top doesn't even really need to be wrapped with tape. If it's applied properly, it shouldn't leak. And the other side of the line we're going to use today is by far the most convenient option also. It's a SharkBite tip that just slides on and works wonderfully. So I'm going to lay this down. The first thing we're going to do is mark our pipes to make sure we put the SharkBite on far enough. And we do that by selecting the 3/4 inch on the adjustment tool. I'm just going to slide it on there and make a mark. I'm going to do the same on the other pipe so it's ready to go. Now once that's taken care of, we're ready to get these screwed on. I'm going to start by just getting these hand tight, and then I'll follow up with the wrench. These need to be just tight enough to not leak with that rubber gasket on there. That rubber gasket doesn't take an amount of crazy tight, just regular tight. Now we want the hose nice and flexible. It's got to do a little dance to get up where it's going, but then we're just going to slide it on and make sure it slides on all the way to the end of the fitting, and we're close to our mark. The feed to the house is now ready. The other supply line goes on in the same fashion. Well, I'm going to double check and make sure it has its rubber gasket. It does. Be ashamed to get it together and for some reason that had fallen out or something and turn on the water and make a mess. At this point, your wife really wants her hot water back. She's got plans tonight and you're holding her up. So no pressure, but you're almost done. Once again, flexible of the line, making sure it's ready to go. Gonna hold it tight. Make sure that SharkBite fitting beds all the way. We've got good placement with the marks. Do we? Yes, yes, good, good. Okay, at this point, you want to turn the water on, let it fill up. While it's filling up, which you'll be able to hear clearly, the only couple of things we need to do is to get the electrical hooked up and to connect the TPR valve. Now this temperature pressure relief valve, should it ever go off, or should it begin to fail and just start dribbling a little bit, you don't want it to just do that right on here, or heaven forbid it goes wide open due to too high a pressure and blows water all over the wall. So you're going to want to hook a drain pipe onto that. Your other water heater probably had one you might be able to reuse, or you can buy them already pre-bent and ready to install, and they just screw on real simply. So you'll need to get that. Now for the electrical connection, We've got these covers. We're going to loosen these screws and get them set aside so that we can get under this cover. This cover has the ground screw on it. Take this cover off too, just so we've got plenty of room to work. In here, you'll find a ground wire already attached. You'll find the red hot and the black hot. This is for a 208 or 240 volt setup. But your incoming from your previous one will allow this to run properly. This particular wire will have been already ran with hots to both and the ground operating as a central neutral. I'm going to use my wire strippers, the 12 gauge section, to strip off a small amount of each of those. Now you should have thoroughly tested this wire before disconnecting the other water heater after switching off the breaker to make sure that it's definitely not hot. Now, because the ground attaches through a screw, I only need to clamp these two. We're almost ready for that. The first thing we're going to do, though, to continue this process is to get one of these clamps installed. These are available in the electrical section. Why they don't come with a water heater, I'm not sure. I think it's possible that because different water heaters have different entry points for the electrical, they thought they'd just leave it up to the electrician or whoever's doing the installation, the plumber or whatnot. We're going to take that nut off, slide it through there. I usually try and put the screws facing forward so they're easier to access later. And tighten that nut. Now, one thing I want to mention in passing while I'm working on this, I have put this water heater for the sake of the demonstration up on some wood blocks, but it's just so we get some decent height so we can have good clarity here. You obviously wouldn't want to put it on wood blocks at home. If for some reason you need to raise it in the pan to access the drain more easily, sometimes the drains can be right at the bottom, and if the water heater is sitting flat on the floor inside a pan, you wouldn't even be able to access that. But if you're going to set it on something, set it on a paving block or a couple of paving blocks or some bricks, something that's resistant to water. You don't want to put wood pieces underneath there because if it does start to drain in the pan, it'll corrode the wood. You could end up in a tough situation. Now, I've got the clamp in place. I'm going to run my wires through there like so. I'm going to leave the clamp loose right now. Get this other cover in place. No, I guess we can hook it. We should hook these up first. Yeah, that'd be easier. We'll go ahead and go black to white, or black to black and white to red on this. You know what? I think I'm going to strip a little more of this wire, make it a little more convenient. I'm going to get some more of this insulation off because we've got plenty of room inside that box for excess wire. So I'm using the insulation stripping section of that. And now, let's get these attached. I'm going to keep turning these nuts until I start to see some turn of the wire, like that. Should be good there. Black to black, same circumstance. I'm looking for a twisting of the wire. A little more wire from the wall. Now we can set this cover in and place our ground wire. This bolt essentially just comes down and pinches that ground wire. And because of that, you need to make sure that your cover is well secured. If it's not, then it isn't transferring the ground quite as solidly as it should be. And that's also why you want to make sure not to use a power screwdriver on these. as you don't want to strip out these holes and then end up having a problem with that. I'm going to pull a little more wire through so I can make sure this clamp is grabbing the yellow insulation instead of the individual wire insulation. I'll go ahead and tighten this clamp up. Almost there. Good. Good. I'll get these two screws in. And once your water heater is full, you will be ready for a test. Now, once you get this electrical connection good and solid, you want to make sure, you can usually hear it filling, but once you're sure it's full, by going into the house and turning on a hot water faucet somewhere, and letting it do its spitting thing, you can be sure that the tank is full. Now once the tank is full and everything is hooked up and good and solid, you've double checked for leaks in these areas to make sure everything's okay, then you can go back, turn on your panel, and wait patiently while it heats up the water. And then, if there's an issue with it being too hot or not hot enough, then you can adjust the temperature under the covers at that point. All right, looks like you got it taken care of. I'll go get that finished up.